We've seen footage of people, protesters being hit by armoured vehicles. You said no one's been wounded, but we've seen footage of that. We've also heard reports from doctors that people are being treated for injuries from rubber bullets. What can you tell us about that? And has the Maduro government committed not to use live ammunition against protesters?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The only live ammunition which has been used is the live ammunition against an army colonel who was shot in the neck by one protester exactly in the same place. The only live ammunition, rubber bullets are no live ammunition, I'm sorry to say. They are used in crowd control, and they are no lethal weapons. The only actual lethal weapon that was used this morning was against an army colonel who was protecting the army barracks in that place. And as far as the truck, which has been repeating 10,000 times in the last 2 hours, the only incident that may have been an accident, and is the only incident that you want, no, you personally not, the media want to show as an example of the excesses in repression of our government. But let me tell you something. There was an attempt of a violent coup d'etat calling for an insurrection of armed forces. They were using machine guns and high-caliber weapons in that attempt, and the potential of that reckless attempt to create havoc and massive destruction in Venezuela was enormous. And it was the restraint of our government, which is used to this kind of street protest, which we can say that we were actually very fortunate to come out of it with as little damage as possible. I mean, we are proud, I am personally proud, that something as dangerous as happened this morning has finished with no lives to, casualties to lament. No?
I'm a little confused by what you're saying, because you're saying on one hand, this was just a propaganda exercise, and on the other, you say it was extremely dangerous and could have lost lots of lives. So could you explain what seems to be a discrepancy there?
No, there is no discrepancy.
And
it's a paradox,
second part of my question, do you now believe that President Maduro is safe in power? Will he be in power in a couple of hours' time, in a day's time, in a month's time, in a year's time?
Thank you very much indeed for the question. There is no contradiction whatsoever on what just I said. I said that the potential of that action was criminally enormous, but the actual truth was nothing. And the paradox is the following: as they had no root in our country and in our society, they attempted to ignite a civil war, calling for a military insurrection, but as no one believes in them, they achieved nothing. So the potential, the criminal intent was enormous, but the actual reality was nothing. So there is no contradiction, it's a paradox. And the second point is, are President Maduro safe the next 30 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours? Well, let me say, if these people is that they showed this morning is all they got, we are safe for the next 20 years. I mean, they have nothing. The only thing they have, which is dangerous, is the American government. That's really something to count on. I mean, we are not afraid of our people. We are afraid, or not afraid, we are cautious and vigilant on this superpower let loose around the world, wreaking havoc. And they try to do the same in Venezuela.
Thank you, Ambassador, on behalf of ANCA. First of all, I would like to kindly remind that usually, per tradition of this room, the first question goes to ANCA. Thank you. My name is Valeria Robeco from ANSA Newswire. My question is on the last word of U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. Is just said that has called out Venezuela's defense minister, head of Supreme Court, and head of Presidential Guard, and he says that they agreed that President Maduro has to go. What's your reaction on that? Thank you.
Again, propaganda. Listen, this is President Trump, by the way, the self-proclaimed president of the whole world, and also the actual self-proclaimed president of Venezuela, Mr. Trump. He's saying that he's very concerned about freedom in Venezuela. Mr. Pence also has just tweeted saying that they won't let go the fight for freedom, freedom-loving people of Venezuela who are taking to the streets today, and we are with you. I mean, these are the actual leaders. Non-Venezuelan people can believe that these are the liberators on anything. You see, we are the only legitimate government of Venezuela in the United Nations, and the Secretary General should recognize that fact. And the event that happens this morning, which is that there was a reckless attempt, failed attempt, to overthrow by violence, our government should call for the Secretary General to exercise his duty for calling for peace and the respect of our constitutional, democratically elected government, and not to say that he's impartial or neutral or whatever other word, ambiguous word. The defense of peace in Venezuela goes through the defense of the constitutional government, which, as you could see today, is exercising restraint for the maintenance of our peace. And then, with your question, let me answer her question, which is very important. Sanctions kill, as simple as that. Sanctions are criminal. Sanctions are weapons of mass destruction. You don't see the smoke, but you see the effect. You see the deleterious effect of killing and suffering, and the sanctions use banks, sanctions use ships, sanctions use insurance companies, and financial blockades. They cannot get away with it. They cannot just say that they are concerned about liberty or freedom or the children in Venezuela and then exercise a ghastly, nasty policy of calculated cruelty. They are acting like torturers. It's a collective punishment. And you cannot, even if it's new, you could see for yourself that it's not the only time that they have tried to choke, to strangle a country using this kind of measures. And we are fighting against that, and we are denouncing this criminal attempt. And it's ridiculous that they try to play both roles, the balls of the killer and the balls of the savior. It's ridiculous. We have to fight that back. It's one of the most strange and weird situations we are in now, which is the superpower of the world is the main rogue state, going around without care, destroying countries, invading countries, and threatening with the use of force. And you yourself said, let me give you this piece of information. Check it for yourself. During the Iraq War, the American embassy in Baghdad had 5,000 staff, personnel, American personnel. So, war embassy in Baghdad. You know how many staff are in the American embassy in Bogota? 3,000. Do you think that 3,000 Americans in Bogota are working to fight for water or agriculture? This is a war embassy, I'm sorry to say. These people are planning an invasion. Ask the Americans what 3,000 staff are doing in their embassy in Bogota. It's not 3,000 soldiers that are going to invade Venezuela. No, it's not that simple. It's 3,000 planners, 3,000 intelligence officers, 3,000 trainers, 3,000 technicians, 3,000 information warfare technicians. It's a war embassy. Show me wherever in the world there are more than 3,000 Americans in one embassy.